Hello and welcome everyone to the Daily News analysis of 31st of October 2023. तो आज के इम्पोर्टेंट आर्टिकल वन बाय वन डिस्कस कर लेते हैं. पीएम लॉन्चेस न्यू प्रोजेक्ट्स इन गुजरात. Researchers identify new mushroom species from Western Ghats. Then last was the Israel-Palestine conflict is at brand point towards stabilization of US-China ties. Then easing of the transport of cargo by railways. The expansion of settlements into flood-prone areas. The act of photocopying its origin, working and wide-ranging impact. Then Finance Minister urges closer global cooperation to halt smuggling. NAB masterminds Chinese vessel begins research of the coast of Sri Lanka amid India's concern. तो पहला जो है पीएम लॉन्चेस न्यू प्रोजेक्ट्स इन गुजरात. Prime Minister Narendra Modi dedicated a slew of infrastructure projects worth 5,950 crore rupees in Gujarat on Monday during his two-day visit to his home home state. He said the rapid development taking place in the country is being praised across the world and credited it to the stable government at the center. After visiting the famous Ambaji temple on arriving in the state, Mr. Modi traveled by chopper to Kerala in North Gujarat. He then proceeded to the venue of the public rally in an open-top jeep with Chief Minister Bhupendra Patel and State BJP Chief C.R. Patel, where he inaugurated and laid the foundation stone of various projects. He inaugurated railway projects such as new sections of Western dedicated freight corridor and doubling the Viram Gam Somakhiali rail line and initiatives to recharge lakes, construct a barrage on the Sabarmati River and set up drinking water and sewage treatment facilities. Then irrigation road widening. He also laid the foundation stone of irrigation and road widening projects. The projects will come up in the district of Mehsana, Ahmedabad, Banaskantha, Sabarkantha, Mahisagar, Gandhinagar and Patan. At the root of the rapid development begin being seen in the country and winning India praise in the world is the power of public that has given a stable government, the Prime Minister said addressing the gathering. He lauded the contribution of women in the dairy sector and said that due to their hard work, their household income has become stable. Hundreds of new veterinary hospitals have been set up in the North Gujarat because we understand the potential of cattle. Our focus is to ensure that animals remain healthy and get proper service so that their milk yield increases, the Prime Minister said. The government has set apart 15,000 crore for the free vaccination of animals and appealed to dairy farmers to get their animals vaccinated. Pledged to bring change. In the last 2 decades, over 800 new rural women cooperative societies were set up in the state and efforts are being made to develop biogas plants along with dairy farms. He said, Mr. Modi said, he has taken a pledge to change North Gujarat and the coastal and tribal region of the state. He emphasized on ensuring connectivity and supply of water for irrigation. We have created a Gujarat where the youth do not get to see the hardship felt by their parents. He said the area under irrigation has increased over nearly 2 decades, helping farmers cultivate many new type of crops. Mr. Modi said Isab, Isabgol and potatoes from North Gujarat are in the gold demand in the world. North Gujarat has witnessed rapid industrialization, helping create jobs for locals and drawing migrants, the PM said. The next way researchers identify new mushroom species from the Western Ghats. A tiny fragile looking mushroom spotting a honey yellow cap found on the campus of the Jawaharlal Nehru Tropical Botanic Garden and Research Institutes. And Paladu in Thiruvananthapuram has been identified as a new species, turning the spotlight once again on the remarkable Western Ghat biodiversity. The discovery also gives fresh impetus to the study of the region's fungal diversity. Researchers at the JNTBRGRI identified and described the new species as belonging to the genus Condoleezza, a paper by C.K. Pradeep, Principal Scientist, Microbiology Division, and P.K. Nayana, research students of JNTBGRI, highlighting the findings has been published in the scientific journal Phytotaxa. The new species has been named Condoleezza albosquamos Alboquamosus for the white fully scale-like structure on its pallias or cap. Delicate in build, the mushroom grows to a height of just about 58 mm. Seven species of the genus Sathylrella, reported earlier from the early India, are now recognized as Condoleomyces. The discovery of a new species of the genus Condoleomyces in India is special, given that there are only 35 species in this genus worldwide, Dr. Pradeep said. Then let's say lost voice. India has expanded its decision to abstain at the last week's vote at the United Nations General Assembly (UNGA) for the ceasefire in the Israel-Palestine conflict as its way for protesting of the omission of any explicit condemnation of the heinous October 7 terror attack by Hamas militants on Israel. India's principled stand on terrorism, who is the deputy permanent representative to the United Nations articulated cannot be questioned. However, the death toll is rising and the need for global solidarity to stop the violence is imperative. A task that New Delhi, with its traditionally balanced position on the issue and its recent G20 role in bridging global divides, would have been well suited to play every other country in the neighborhood in the extended BRICS grouping, and much of the developing world was part of the 120 countries that voted for the UNGA resolution on Friday. Regardless of its reasoning, New Delhi had other option which it overlooked or ignored. The resolution at the emergency special session entitled protection of civilians and upholding legal and humanitarian obligations does include a paragraph condemning all acts of violence aimed at Palestinian and Israeli civilians, including all acts of terrorism and indiscriminate attacks. India could have played a prominent diplomatic role with countries proposing the resolution to ensure clear mention of the October 7 attacks, including during Prime Minister Narendra Modi's recent conversation with Jordan's King Abdullah bin Al Hussein about the conflict. India's leadership of such an amendment may have fared bit better than the Canadian proposal that failed to secure two-thirds of the UNGA membership present. Alternative India could have voted for the motion while recording in its explanation of the vote that it regretted the omissions of the specific reference to the October 7 attacks, which is what France did in its EOB. India did not itself name Hamas for the terror attack, nor has it so far designated Hamas as a terror group, leaving some doubt about the explicit mention that New Delhi had wanted. On the other hand, if India wanted to convey a strong line on fighting terrorism, it could have voted against the resolution along with the US and the UK and Israel. India's abstention indicates a shift in the Modi government's stand, seeking a safe position rather than taking a stand on the violence in Israel and Palestine. This is a departure from India's UNGA vote in 2018 that called for Israel to cease excessive force in retaliatory strikes on the Gaza at the time and is more in line with its decision to abstain on votes at the United Nations in 2021 on resolutions critical of Russia's war in Ukraine. The government lost an opportunity to make India's voice heard in the growing geopolitical conflict, abstaining on a matter of global importance without making efforts to forge a consensus is out of synchronize with a desire to be the voice of the global south or for a seat at the global high table. Then Israel-Palestine conflict is at the bend point. As I watch the television and see Gaza being bulldozed, I am informed that the apartment building I have lived in for 2 years in Gaza between 1996 and 98 was bombed and brought down to 2 weeks earlier. It was one of the taller building, and I knew it did not stand a chance. Anyway, I keep wondering what has happened to my friends in Gaza, especially my landlord Abu Zakari and his lovely family and children who made my life so much easier in a non-family posting. Are they still alive? What Hamas did to Israel on October 7, 2023 was unacceptable. It was a brutal terror attack when I chaired the Counter-Terrorism Committee in the United Nations Security Council in 2022, one thing we all agreed on is that there can be no justification for terror, so nothing should justify October 7 as well. But does this make the Palestinian cause or the Palestinian fight against occupation by Israel for several decades any less justified? No, it does not. The United Nations Security Council's Resolution 242 and 338 embodied the principle of land for peace. Israel should have ideally withdrawn from occupied land in the West Bank, Gaza, and East Jerusalem in return for peace, which is a security recognition, normalcy, and peace for the peoples of the two states of Israel and Palestine. Interestingly, the revised 2017 Charter of Hamas II accepted a two-state solution based on the 1967 border. Let us face it, the two-state solution alone can bring peace. A one-state solution is a no-state non-solution. Honest, Israel understandably cannot let Hamas terror go unchallenged. The infrastructure built by Hamas in Gaza needs to be dismantled, and the Israeli hostages released for Israel. Every Israeli life counts, but how much does a Palestinian life count for? Does it justify the killing of 8,000 plus Palestinian civilians in a mere 2022 of 8,000 plus Palestinian civilians in a mere 22 days, with the children making up to 40% non-counting hundreds under the rubble, vis-a-vis 9,600 casualties in 20 months of the Ukraine conflict? How many Palestinian lives are unacceptable collateral damages? A dehumanization to make such a pounding of Gaza acceptable. We have seen the West and their media equate Hamas with to all 2.2 million Palestinians in Gaza so that they can be dehumanized and soon to be equal culpable. Humanization makes it easier to accept indiscriminate bombing without an outcry. But the West has also tried to equate the fight for Palestinian statehood with this fight against Hamas to discredit the larger cause. This is dangerous. Another Western euphemism is the word humanitarian issue. Humanitarian assistance is to meet basic needs when, for example, fed with the collective punishment by Israel on the Gazan through a blockade of water, food, medicine, and electricity. But what is unfolding is a human tragedy, the killing of thousands of innocent lives and the mass displacement of 1.2 million Palestinians. There is not a humanitarian question here, but a question of humanity itself on the Arab world. While one can accuse the West hypocrisy and double standards, what about the Arabs? Have they not been equally responsible for the sidelining Palestine in their race for normalization with Israel? The Arab countries talked about the Palestinian issue and even said that the Israel has agreed to stop further annexation, while Israel did the exact opposite by expanding settlements. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu actually said that the land for peace has now been substituted by peace for peace, and it was the opinion that the real issue in the West Asia was now Iran and not Palestine, while Palestine statehood was a footnote in their normalization agreement with Israel. It is in danger of being reduced to a footnote to history. Even the present reaction of the Arab countries is to contain the popular support in their streets. It would not the Gulf countries have put their oil cloud to better effect before the Israel ground operation started. Normalization relations with Israel while ignoring the Palestinian issue will not give them security, especially when they are moving towards a more liberal governance in the Gulf. Israel is no less complicit in this course of issue. Successive governments have strived to make the two-state solution more and more difficult. The current ultranationalist government of Israel is only an extreme manifestation since it has openly declared its opposition to a two-state solution. How else can one explain the fact that 250 Palestinian civilians were killed in the West Bank alone before October 7, where no Hamas is present? How How else can one explain the untrammelled expansion of settlements and creating facts on the ground with everyone watching helplessly this transgression of United Nations Security Council Resolution 2334 and even more fundamentally was not Israel that nurtured Hamas to undercut the Palestinian Liberation Organization and Fateh, the later President Yasser Arafat himself, including by releasing the jailed spiritual founder of Hamas, Sheikh Yassin to Gaza. The irony of the Israel-Palestinian history is that it is only when there is a major violent conflagration that the Palestinian issue received the attention. Then comes agreement followed by the non-implementation. Violence begins again. The then uh, agreement and so the Kalachakra moves on. The Yom Kippur War on 1973 led to the Israel-Egypt Camp David Accords in 1978 with the promise of Palestinian self-rule when nothing happened. Intifada came in 1987. Hamas came into existence. The Intifada led the Oslo Accord of the 1993 and 1995 with more promise of the self-rule through the Palestinian Authority. Another round of backsliding violence within an election in between and broken promises. Gaza is now widely acknowledged as the largest open-air prison. So here we are condemning Hamas and rightly so for this terror act, but not acknowledging the omission and commission of the past is why the United Nations Secretary General warned that such incidents do not occur in a vacuum. As the former Prime Minister of Israel, Ehud Barak, said in an interview, the Gaza ground operation will throw up issues such as the retrieving of hostages, potential violation of international law by Israel, mounting civilian casualties and erosion of international support, possible regional flare-up, and finally identifying who to pass the baton to when the operation are complete. If operation prolonged and all indicators point to it dragging on, the civilian casualty mount and Gaza gets depo- depopulated as refugees flow out, it will be an even bigger human disaster. It will potentially kill the Palestinian statehood unless the Kalachakra brings about something more tangible than false promises. India's stand. While we have always stood for two-state solution, India has rightly been wary of the fallout of the terror acts in Israel on its neighborhood. India is in synchronized with the Arab world in its normalization with Israel with groupings such as the I2U2 India, Israel and United Arab Emirates and the United States. While we do not have a direct rule yet, since it is time the US and the West and the Gulf and the Arab world showed leadership first, any regional fallout will affect us. Therefore, going forward, it is important for India to come out not just against terrorism but also more forcefully against the human tragedy playing out in Gaza. In this proximity with Israel and the US will only be an asset. Then towards stabilization US-China ties. In this time of war, the quiet US-China dialogue is a significant factor for peace from a situation where they were virtually not talking to each other. The two global powers appear to have reached a point where a presidential summit may be on the cards at the sidelines of the Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit in San Francisco in November. In maybe it may be too soon to use the words like detonate, but what we could perhaps hope for is a tactical stabilization of the ties between the two of the world's leading powers at the immediate levels. Washington's ability to talk to China could promote restraint in West Asia. China has undoubtedly influence on Iran, which virtually controls the Hezbollah in Lebanon. The Hezbollah's entry into the war in Gaza could really complicate the situation in the region. Last week, Wang Wei visited the US, the first by Chinese foreign minister since the pandemic, and met with President Joe Biden and senior US officials. He reported to have told the US strategic community that the road to San Francisco will not be a smooth one. Mr. Wang visit came in the wake of a visit of the US Secretary of the State Treasury and Commerce to China in the last few months till May. The Chinese military was refusing to take calls from the Pentagon with the sacking of Chinese Defense Minister Li Shangfu. The issue has become moot. The American position in the latest issue of Foreign Affairs, U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan wrote, high-level and repeated interaction is crucial to clear up a misperception, misperception avoid miscommunication, send unambiguous signals, and arrest a downward spiral that could erupt into a major crisis. Recall that Mr. Biden and Chinese President Xi Jinping met in Bali at the sidelines of the G20 summit last year and discussed Taiwan in their competition and strategic communication, but the relationship went into a tailspin following the so-called spy balloon incident earlier this year. The US is currently speaking from a position of strength. Its economy is doing well, while that of China is struggling. In foreign policy, the Biden administration has been able to revive America's traditional alliance in Europe on account of the Ukraine war and strengthen the hub and spoke alliance into a larger matrix covering in the Indo-Pacific. This involves strengthened allies with the India upgraded with Australia, Vietnam, Japan, and revived ties with the Philippines. But the Biden administration has not relented on the top line it adapted towards Beijing from the outset and maintains the Trump-era traffic and initiated a policy of export restriction designed to hobble the growth of the Chinese high-tech industry. Its national security strategy of the last October said that China was the only competitor with both the intend to reshape the international order and increasingly the economic diplomatic, military technology power to advance the objective. However, the administration said that it was keen to establish guardrails to ensure that the relationship did not go off track, but this did not assuage China. A sense of bitterness was evident in March when Mr. Xi unusually named the US for having contended and suppressed us in all-round way. Qing Guang subsequently said as foreign minister said that no amount of guardrails can prevent derailing if the US continues to speed down the wrong path. The US continues to tighten its export control to Beijing and is taking through on the China-Philippines stand-up at the second Thomas Sol in the South China Sea. It is also tightening the control on its outward investment to China and restricting Chinese investments in the US. Its approach was identified the Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen, who visited Beijing earlier this year. It was a call for constructive engagement with China involving 3 points: national security of the US and its allies and economic relationship based on fair competition and cooperation on urgent global challenges. Mr. Allen rejected the idea that the US wanted to decouple its economy from China, noting that the US trades more with China than with the other countries except its neighbors Canada and Mexico. China believes that the US remains a formidable military power but is in inevitable decline, but it would like to maintain the ahead of the cooperation and peaceful coexistence rather than deal with the competitive and confrontational posture that the US has adopted. China has long sought US acceptance of its economic and political system, which means the supremacy of the Chinese Communist Party militarily and politically. China has sought to establish its regional dominance in the Western Pacific, but its neighbors such as Japan, the Philippines, and Vietnam, which are backed by the US contest, this Taiwan occupies a difficult position in this situation. Under Grising, this is a real politic of the US global politics, preventing the rise of a hegemony power on either end of the Eurasia could well be a prelude to undermining of its own global hegemony. US-China relations are crucial in dealing with global issues such as climate change for crises such as the one in West Asia, but the climate of turbulence is hampering effective cooperation. It is hoped that the Biden-Xi summit can begin the process of improving China-US ties and putting their bilateral relationship on an even keel. The relationship will retain a strong competitive tenor, but that should not prevent the US and the China from making it pragmatic. The next is in the transport of cargo by railways. The railways has been one of the more cheaper modes of the transportation for moving bulk cargo. The government has therefore realized that it needs to be supported with reduced overall logistic cost and schemes to improve green mobility. Identifying infrastructure investment in the sector as a key thrust areas in the government. The government of India has formulated two policies: the Pradhan Mantri Gati Shakti (PMGS) policy for a national master plan (NMP) and national logistic policy (NLP). The PMGS aims to bring synergy to create a seamless multimodal transport network in India, with the NMP employing technology and IT tools for coordinating planning of infrastructure. The NLP focuses on building a national logistic portal and integrating platforms of various ministries. Not many major policy components and details are available in the governmental website on PMGS in reference to the Indian Railways. The Department for the Promotion of Industry and Internal Trade's website mentions three things: integration of the postal and railway networks, one station, one product, and the introduction of 400 Vande Bharat trains without anything about increasing the IR share in moving cargo, increasing the bulk cargo. The IR has taken some initiative in the bulk cargo arena in the relaxed block rake movement rules to provide a facility to load from to multiple location permitted mini rakes introduced private freight terminals and relaxed condition in private sidings. The Gati Shakti terminal policy has eased the stipulation for the cooperation of this terminal and progressively all PFT and private sidings are being converted into GCTs. The IR has also partnered with freight operators in recent years, encouraging them to invest in wagons for movement of their cargo, thus helping in the induction of more than 16,000 privately owned wagons to facilitate specialized traffic like automobiles and fly ash. While it is early to judge the impact of these initiatives. The IR's share in bulk cargo continues to decline. Some decline is expected as production becomes more decentralized and the IR cost advantage diminishes. The offset this IR should reduce non-peace barrier and distribute transitions cost associated with it low as many customer as possible. A railway sidings is a capital intensive high cost proposition and only large industries can manage them with others having to cover large distances to load their cargo. This increases the logistic cost and hence the reluctances to patronize the IR. For example, in the cement sector in 2017-18, 33 plants with less than 1 million tons empty annual capacity had a production share of 6.5%, but their share in rail loading was 3.8%, whereas plant with more than 2.5 metric ton annual capacity with a production share of 57%, the rail share was 69.5%. Similar is the picture for many private mines and many steel plants, agricultural markets, etc. There is an immediate need to develop consumer common user facility at cargo aggregation and dispersal point in mining clusters, industrial cluster and large cities. The knowledge of these cluster rests with the states and not the IR or other central ministries, and thus collaboration with the state government is a sine qua non. The relationship of the IR with state governments has been a sort of a patron silent client relationship as many states regularly demand rail lines in their areas. A change in this attitude is necessary in the order for railways to participate in the planning of industrial cluster and the mines in the city region. If it has to increase its share in the movement of cargo. Environmental constraints. The IR must also look at the new commodities like fly ash. The Ministry of Environment and Forest (MOEF) started issuing notifications since 1999 for the complete utilization of fly ash. In 2021, the production was 232 metric ton and utilization was 214 metric ton. The IR never realized the potential and approved many power plant sidings without fly ash loading facility, rendering it to the to be a major minor player in its transportation, and it must proactively correct this wrong. Another necessity is for the IR to encourage and liberalize the design of new wagons amenable to higher and efficient loading to deal with new commodities. Finally, environmental consideration and are constraining loading by IR. As per recent government regulation, environmental clearance for rail loading unloading facilities has been made mandatory, but the same has not been imposed on the road loading unloading facilities. These restrictions have made some users move cargo by road due to high transaction cost involved with the environmental clearance. Such instructions should be moved agnostic based on the quantity of a cargo loaded and the potential for environmental degradation. Otherwise, rail loading will be hampered, giving fillip to more environmentally polluted road transport. And then next is the expansion of settlement into flood-prone areas. Indian urban areas have been flooding more and more often, destroying lives and livelihoods. Yet, according to a study led by the World Bank and published in Nature on October 4, flood risk in many cities is rising because they are expanding into flood-prone areas. According to the paper, since 1985, human settlements in the flood-prone areas have more than doubled. Experts says the findings spotlight the risk of unsustainable urbanization in India. The study also found that middle-income countries like India have more urban settlements in flood-prone zones than low and high-income countries. How is India at risk? India is not among the 20 countries whose settlements are most exposed to flood hazards, but it was the third highest contributor to the global settlements after China and the US and also third after China and Vietnam among countries with new settlements expanding into flood-prone areas all from 1985 to 2015. Gautam Bhan, a researcher at the Indian Institute of Human Settlements (IIHS) Bengaluru, said this means India is at a significant risk of flood-related problems that could worsen the coming years if the country was not careful. Raj Bhagat Palani-Kemi, a geoanalyst at WRI India, said the data in the study from a database called EMDAT may not have the granularity required for studying flood-prone areas in our urban areas and peri-urban areas. At the heart of flood-related hazards is where we build or expand our cities. Mr. Palanichami had written in 2022, he had estimated that the Bengaluru floods that year cost the city 225 crore rupees. In 1901 and 2022, the city's population grew from around 1.6 lakh to more than a crore. To accommodate these people, the city expanded, but the new localities overlooked the local topography. Mr. Polani Kemi added, who are the most affected? Both Mr. Polanikemi and Dr. Bhan agree that the risk is disproportionately higher for those living in the informal structure. As Dr. Bhan said, the geography of environmental risk is also the geography of informal low-income housing. Informal housing in the cities is on land that is vacant and less desirable, so that they are not immediately driven off. He added, so they often lie in the low lying flood prone areas. According to Dr. Bhan, an important reason why urbanization has expanded into the flood-prone areas in that we do not have the governance processes to say, look, this kind of development is environmentally unstable. When regulation are applied to new construction, they are often applied only to big infrastructure projects and not to medium and small scale modifications of localities. This contradicts the notion that certain localities are more flood prone and that flooding and the flood risk are locality levels issues. Dr. Bhan added that the people commonly violate the existing government regulation. He invoked the examples of a rise in ecotourism reports on forest land and the construction of large structures including government buildings and even religious structures on rivers, floodplains. What is to be done? As cities continue to expand, Mr. Palanichami and Dr. Bhan cautioned that we can no longer avoid expanding into flood-prone areas. Market forces tend to push expansion into flood-prone areas, said Mr. Palanichami, but recognizing what these areas are and that we are actually expanding into them is the first step towards Sustainable urban planning that address these key some forms of adaptation are necessary, said Dr. Khan, that and they need to differentiate between the low-income resident and unauthorized structure erected for the elite. Every city needs to be a proper scientific mapping of the floodplain areas. Mr. Palanikami said. Dr. Khan added that the urban government need to make housing in such areas more flood resilient and food and protect low income housing. He gave the example of a riverside settlement that use stilt houses like those used by the Missing and the Miha communities along the Brahmaputra. The next is the act of photocopying, its origin, working and wide-ranging impact. For the first time in the world history, mechanical reproduction emancipates the work of art from its parasitical dependence on rituals to an ever greater degree. The work of art reproduces become the work of art designed for reproducibility. The German philosopher Walter Benjamin wrote these words in his landmark 1935 essay The Work of Art in the Age of the Mechanical Reproduction. While Benjamin's thesis centered on the character of art in a capitalist society and the effect of mass production, reproduction, and the reproducibility on it, it is tempting to see parallels to the effects that photocopying had on the production and availability of a textual material in the modern era. What is photocopying? Broadly, photocopying is a set of techniques used to duplicate content using, among other things, light. However, the contemporary colloquial use of the word photocopying refers almost exclusively to ex- exography, but both the word exography and the name Xerox come from the Greek root word "zero", meaning dry. This is because xerography is a type of photography method where the process does not involve messy liquid chemicals. Xerographic machines are in ubiquitous use around the world toward the quickly and cheaply reproduce printed material. How does xerography work? Xerography has a few basic elements. The first is the photoconductive surface, a surface coated with a photoconductive material such a material when exposed to light allows electron to flow through it, that is conduct electricity, but blocks them when it is dark. This surface is negatively charged by placing a thin negatively charged wire with a high voltage next to it. Then the sheet of the paper to be copied is illuminated with a bright light. The darker parts of the paper where something is printed do not reflect the light, whereas the unmarked parts do. This reflected light is carried by lenses and mirrors to fall on the photoconductive surface. In the parts of the surface where light falls, the photoconducting material will become conductive and allow the electron near its surface to dissipate downwards into a grounding. So the parts that remains negatively charged at the end of this step will correspond to parts of the paper to be copied TBC where something was printed. Next, a powdery substance called toner is applied to the surface. The toner is positively charged, so it will settle where the negative charge persists on the surface. The surface then transfers to the patterns of the toner on its to a sheet of paper. The paper has a stronger negative charge that causes the toner to jump. Finally, the toner is heated so that it melts and fuses with the paper. This is the paper that rolls out of the photocopying machine. The full process having been completed in a few seconds. In practice, a rotating drum is used instead of a flat surface and the paper TBC is illuminated by a passing of the stroboscopic light or a moving scanner, there have been many innovations since the idea of a dry photocopying technique first took shape in the 1930s to improve the xerographic process, including the way the toner is supplied, the unit cost of material, the development of color copying, the use of laser, and the overall user experience who intended a xerography inspired by the work of the Hungarian engineer Paul Celanyi, an American attorney named Chester F. Carlson came up with a rudimentary version of xerography by 1938. 7 years later, he sold his idea to a non-profit organization called the Battle Memorial Institute in Ohio, where researchers refined the technique. A year later, in 1946, the small New York-based Haloid Photographic Company purchased a license from Battle to build a machine based on the technique. The company trademarked the name for the machine as the Xerox machine in 1948 and availed the first model for sale in 1949. Allied managers were responsible for coming the word xerography, replacing the Carlson's electrophotography. Allied itself changed its name to Allied Xerox in 1958 and to Xerox Corporation in 1961. The two particular models accelerated the adoption of this technology worldwide. The Xerox 1914 in 1959, which was marketed as being very simple to use, and the Xerox 813 in 1963 is being able to fit on a table. About a decade later, Xerox also introduced the laser-based photocopier. Instead of using a lamp to reflect light of the document to be copied to the drum, the data to be copied or printed was encoded as a bitmap that was fed to a laser, which then inscribed the requisite steps into the drum. By the second half of the 20th century, Xerox was not the sole maker of the photocopier machines, even if it was the dominant supplier. Companies like Kodak made and sorry, released devices based on patent they owned. Xerox remained ahead because its patents ensured that its competitors' products had to use specially prepared paper or which to print rather than plain paper. IBM was able to overcome this when one of its researchers developed a process based on an organic photoconducting material in the late 1960s. Among other changes, how did it change the world? Three examples illustrate a xerography wide-ranging impact. The first was counterfeiting. In 2002, the people discovered the Xerox machine refused to copy banknotes that included a particular marking of five small rings positioned like stars in the Orion constellation. Some small similar marking have since been found on the banknotes of at least 35 national banks. A 2005 statement from Reserve Bank of India accompanying the release of new 50 notes called it the Umron anti-photoing feature, suggesting that a Japanese corporation named Umron was responsible for designing the rings to prevent counterfeiting for duplicating or printing currencies notes using xerographic machines. Secondly, we have copyright and surveillance. In 2012, a raft of academic publishers, including the Oxford University Press, the filed a suit alleging copyright infringement against a photocopy shop and the University of Delhi. The suit claimed that teachers at the university had picked pages from the books by the publisher to be copied and bound together at the shop and sold to university student at 0.50 rupees per page. The matter famously concluded in the university favors highlighting the rights that attempt to end the benefit that accrue from being able to make numerous copies of educational material at low cost. Similarly, Catherine Kitson, an associate professor at the New School University, New York, wrote in a 2016 book, The Spread of a Copy Machine made copying an increasingly independent practice. As a result, these machines enabled the reproduction of a text that would never have passed the censor, such as militant manifesto DIY guides on how to build your own bombs on or grow your own marijuana. And finally, Art Walter Benjamin contended that by taking away the ritual of producing art, but the mechanical reproduction had rerouted art's value in politics, but transformative technology like xerography never have simple consequences, as Dr. Eric Khan wrote in the same book. A vibrant art sense that emerged in 1970s in New York created a generation of innovative artists, writers, and musicians who benefited as much from the low rent in some areas as xerography, allowing musicians without agency to print homemade posters advertising upcoming gigs, artists to move their art out of the gallery and museum and into the street, and writers to publish self-publish jeans, both sides and even books. And finance minister urges closure global cooperation to halt smuggling NAB mastermind. Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman on Monday called for greater intergovernmental cooperation to crack down on global smuggling networks with a focus on capturing the mastermind behind them as a strong deterrent. Speaking at the first global conference on cooperation in the enforcement matters initiated under India's presidency and attended by the top bosses of the World Customs Organization, the minister said the nature of smuggled goods has not been changed for 50, 60 years by now. We should be fairly informed about who is behind it. So I place a lot of emphasis on intergovernmental cooperation along with the WCO so that we track the mastermind behind it with the help of local authorities. She said, noting catching the small fish won't be a deterrent. Actionable enforcement agencies who can now tap technology should engage in intelligence and information sharing that is actionable, she suggests. WCO Secretary General Kunio Mikuria also stressed the importance of knowledge sharing among the custom agencies of all countries. Later in the day, she chaired a meeting of the India's Economic Intelligence Council to discuss issues related to economic crimes, narcotics, and virtual assets, and urged agencies to initiate systematic changes to further improve coordination and information exchange. Smugglers have become increasingly sophisticated, said Sanjay Kumar Agrawal, chairman of the Central Board of Indirect Taxes and Customs. The rise of e-commerce and use of crypto assets for cross-border transactions have added a layer of complexity requiring highlighting focus on enforcement, regulation, and international cooperation. Then Chinese vessel, आज का last article है Chinese vessel begin research of the coast of Sri Lanka amid India's concern. Chinese research vessel Xian 6, which arrived in Colombo last week amid concern raised by India and the US, is set to begin its two-day research of Sri Lankan coast on Monday. Sri Lanka authorities said the research will be pursued of Sri Lanka's western coast and is collaboration with Sri Lanka's National Aquatic Resources Resources Research and Development Agency NARA and the University of Rahuna, according to a spokesperson of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Colombo. Asked about the nature of research, the spokesperson told the Hindu it is marine scientific research. The ministry had earlier said the vessel was at the Colombo port for replenishment, geophysical research. Research ship CN6 was added to China's fleet of marine research vessel in December 2020, said to be the country's first scientific research vessel focusing on geophysical exploration. It is scheduled to operate at sea for about 80 days with 13 research teams onboarding, pursuing 28 scientific research projects across 12,000 nautical miles. In the state-run China Global Television Network reported in the September. Both India and US concerned over the vessel's visit as the two countries had done in the past around earlier visit of Chinese vessels in September this year. INS Delhi, India's first indigenous built destroyer, undertook a goodwill visit to Sri Lanka last week. ROKS Wangaeto, the Great of Korean Navy, and more recently Japan Maritime Self-Defense Force destroyer Akebono DD-108 arrived at the Kamle Harbour, located on Sri Lanka's northeastern coast on an official visit. So friends, this is all for today. We will meet from tomorrow onwards with a new article from the Hindu newspaper. So till then, thank you. Thanks a lot.